While not always the case, movies are often a reflection on societal norms and attitudes. I don't think anyone would argue with me over the claim that Forrest Gump is a baby boomer film.
Run, Forrest, run!
Not just for the time period, but also because of its belief in individualism and the American dream. This is in stark contrast to Fight Club, a Gen X film reflecting on their mundane working life and plaguing consumerism. Taking another leap to the next generation, Shrek's satirical humour and messages of acceptance resonate well with millennial audiences. Although the tone and style of these movies couldn't be any more different, I bring them up to highlight that sometimes movies have the power to define what it means to be part of a generation. Hence, this might come as a shock, but all three films were released in a 7-year window. It's still true that movies reflect their time period. However, it's also just as true that they say a lot about the teams working on them. In fact, it would be silly to generalize every person from their generation as being part of one core belief system. There are trends, yes, but the world is so complex and diverse. The concept of generations is just an arbitrary grouping of people born in different times anyways, and doesn't even apply to cultures outside the West. Hence, it doesn't make much sense to ask what Gen Z are doing with their films. At the end of the day, the oldest are in their mid to late 20s and the youngest in their teens. Most emerging directors are actually millennials, such as Ryan Coogler, Celine Song, Jane Schoenbrunn, and Ari Aster. Hence, when I talk about Gen Z movies in this video, I don't necessarily mean that they were made by someone who is a part of that generation. Obviously, Zoomers are still having an impact on the types of films being made. However, my main focus will be on the themes and ideas that resonate with them. So let's instead ask another question. What sets Gen Z apart from previous generations, and what kinds of movies can we expect to see from them going forward? I'm Gen Z myself, and while I don't claim to speak on behalf of everyone my age, I've noticed some common trends amongst films released this decade. Hopefully you'll agree with what I have to say, but feel free to contribute down in the comments below. With this in mind, what actually distinguishes Gen Z from everyone else? Well, to state the obvious, they grew up with technology from an extremely young age. Social media was a new phenomenon yet to be fully understood, meaning its downsides were amplified for early Zoomers especially. This, coupled with a global pandemic happening during their formative years, radically changed the way our generation communicates. Calling, texting, social media, and dating apps have led to complicated relationship dynamics. Furthermore, culture as a whole is focused entirely around convenience. Music, movies, shopping, and even groceries are now available on demand at any time. Given this environment that they're raised in, it's no wonder that so many films tackle the concepts of nostalgia and longing. To be a little controversial for a second, Gen Z don't really have much of a culture. At least not in the same way that prior generations did. Yes, you could argue that social media is just another form of community, and I agree. However, it's not unifying unlike previous decades. Back in the 90s, an entire country would sit in front of the TV and watch their favourite show at the exact same time, whether that was Seinfeld in the US or Neighbours here in Australia. With the advent of streaming and tailored social media algorithms, however, society now consists of smaller, separated echo chambers. Even if your friends happen to have watched the exact same show as you, they'll likely be on season 4, whereas you'll be falling behind on season 2. The sheer volume of content and personalization has split the public's attention. Of course, Gen Z still want a unifying community, that's just human nature. Hence, it shouldn't be surprising that they've been nostalgic for a time long before they were born. We've seen this with millennials too, evident by the popularity of Stranger Things amongst younger viewers. Hence, in regards to cinema, yearning and nostalgia are common themes that have been prominent in many movies this decade. However, what I love witnessing is that directors grapple with these emotions in completely different ways. Some of the films I'm about to list are more millennial than Gen Z, but regardless, I still think their focus on nostalgia resonates well with our generation. Aftersun's fragmented structure and use of old digital cameras allows Charlotte Wells to convey these feelings through the perspective of our main character Sophie. Despite the fond memories of her holiday with Callum, there's a desperate plea to understand her dad's depression that eluded her as an innocent child.
I can't see myself at 40 to be honest. Surprised I made it to 30.
It's a complicated mix of nostalgia, yearning, innocence, and grief. I definitely recommend watching this film if you haven't, as I believe it will be one of this decade's most defining. Jane Schoenbrunn also grapples with sentimentality in I Saw the TV Glow. However, it's with a completely different purpose in mind. Owen's attachment to their favourite childhood show reflects their desire to be more like the character Isabel. While the movie doesn't outright say it, the visual language makes it obvious that this is an allegory for Owen struggling to come to terms with their transgender identity. I'll talk more about queerness in film later, however I bring up this example to highlight that while many directors employ themes of nostalgia, each can do so for completely different purposes. While both these examples involve characters looking into the past to understand who they are, plenty also involve characters yearning for what could have been. In Celine Song's past lives, Nora and Haesung constantly question their relationship. Might they have ended up together if Nora remained in Seoul? What if they knew each other in a previous life?
12년 전에 그때 내가 만약에 뉴욕에 왔었다면 어땠을까?
Nostalgia isn't being used here for our characters to reminisce about the past, but instead fantasize about what could have been. This is something Zoomers know all too well, having experienced a pandemic and global shutdowns during their formative years. I'm sure we've all wondered where our lives might have been if the circumstances were different. Speaking of the pandemic, there's another theme I believe will continue to pop up over the next decade, and that's loneliness and isolation. Look, it's no secret that Gen Z are considered to be the loneliest generation. Despite modern technology allowing for instantaneous communication, we are paradoxically more isolated than ever. This was already happening to millennials with the death of culture I mentioned previously. However, the pandemic has accelerated these feelings further. Despite coming out last decade, the movies Her and Blade Runner 2049 capture these emotions spectacularly. The latter has aged extremely well, with the emergence of AI chatbots and reports of people falling in love with them. I would not be surprised if this film ends up being popular with Gen Alpha as AI continues to sliver its way into our lives. Blade Runner 2049 has also been retrospectively praised. Although it was a box office disappointment when released, mainly due to the targeted demographic being Gen X fans of the original, it has since resonated with younger viewers. Denis Villeneuve's exploration of identity and isolation in a world of consumption echoes the same feelings Gen Z have towards modern society and capitalism. It should come as no surprise that many can relate to these lonely characters. Recent blockbuster films have been a bit slow in catching up with this growing sentiment, however, it will begin to pop up more in film over the rest of the decade. In fact, we are already seeing it with the release of 28 Years Later and Eddington. Just briefly, I'd like to add that while the pandemic has contributed to feelings of loneliness, it's also greatly fed into feelings of paranoia. Without spoiling 28 Years Later, I will say that this movie does an excellent job at depicting a society driven by fear and isolation. It's a great allegory for how many felt when lockdowns were in place. Eddington is yet to have a theatrical release where I live, but given the film's setting and what we see in the trailers, it seems Ari Aster is committed to exploring these ideas that will definitely resonate with younger viewers. Now that you have an idea of what I mean, what's your favourite Gen Z film? Let me know down in the comments below, and double check that you're subscribed while you're there. I wasn't sure whether to include this next point, but I'll do so here to pivot away from depressing topics for a little bit. We cannot talk about Gen Z's influence on film without mentioning queer representation. Specifically, I want to focus on how this differs greatly from previous generations. Obviously, queer cinema has an extensive history, and the form it takes on has varied dramatically. Gay characters have been tokenized and exploited for comedic purposes, but have also been included for progressive and heartfelt storytelling. When it comes to millennials, their films can be distinguished by plot arcs which tackle marginalization and discrimination. One such example is Everything Everywhere All at Once. The absurdist humor and postmodern structure puts this firmly in the millennial camp. However, in addition, Evelyn's relationship with Joy is the crux of the story. A significant part of her reconciliation involves coming to terms with her daughter's lesbian identity. Such themes have been prevalent for LGBTQ characters for the last 2 decades, with some further examples including Brokeback Mountain and Moonlight. Thanks to shifting cultural values, however, queer characters are now able to face different challenges in movies apart from discrimination. Themes of self-acceptance are still prevalent, as seen earlier with I Saw the TV Glow. However, I can name plenty more examples of films where LGBTQ characters are accepted by their peers. One of the most popular comedies amongst Gen Z, Bottoms involves two lesbians starting a fight club at their school in an attempt to lose their virginities. Had this film been made a decade ago, there might have been a subplot involving fellow students bullying PJ and Josie for their queerness. Instead, the comedy and tension revolves around hiding their intentions from the group of girls. Lesbian identity is integral to the film, while also not being a huge point of conflict.
No one hates us for being gay. Everyone hates us for being gay, untalented, and ugly.
LGBTQ acceptance is high amongst Gen Z, meaning recent movies not only include queer characters, but also allow them to flourish. In Booksmart, jokes about Amy's lesbian identity aren't discriminatory, but instead comment on her unique experiences. Bodies, 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 Aftersun, and Challenges all include gay and lesbian characters who aren't subject to discrimination during the events of the film. This isn't me trying to state that stories about marginalization aren't important. Homophobia is still a very real thing, and stories exploring queer solidarity and acceptance still need to be told. What I'm getting at is that cinema has finally caught up. LGBTQ characters are now afforded the same opportunities for storytelling that straight characters have had for over a century. For most of their lives, Gen Z has had access to calling, texting, and most importantly, social media. Such methods of communication have radically changed relationship dynamics for better and worse. It used to be the case that your friends were people you only met in person every so often. However, with such easy access to the internet, anyone is available for contact at any time of day. While convenient, it's led to such messy complications arising from the most minute actions. Is this person who hasn't responded in 3 days ghosting me? My date sent a thumbs up instead of a worded response, so do they hate me? Why didn't I know about this event that a close friend posted on their Instagram story? We've seen bits and pieces of these behaviors popping up in film, but nothing that's quite explored the full extent of social media's consequences. This shouldn't be surprising. Compelling drama is at its best when nuanced characters interact face to face. Phone calls are normally reserved for quick exposition or comedy, with some notable exceptions. However, this doesn't mean that social media is absent in filmmaking. The plot of Past Lives wouldn't be possible without Facebook. Thanks to the internet, Hae-sung is able to contact his childhood crush who left South Korea 12 years prior. Had this happened at any other point in history, Nora would be but a distant memory. Social media suddenly opens up that possibility of meeting again. Instagram, TikTok, and messaging services are also referenced in many films, such as Booksmart, Talk to Me, and Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. Their purpose isn't quite as integral from a plot standpoint, but instead add a layer of authenticity, as Gen Z audiences can relate to the mannerisms and traits of many characters on screen. I am yet to watch Eddington, but the trailers hint that social media will be prevalent in this film too. As young filmmakers continue to emerge, I expect this sort of commentary to feature heavily in films released within the next decade. On a related note, social media and modern economic conditions have completely radicalized dating culture. It's therefore no wonder that some of the most relatable movies for Gen Z involve complicated relationship dynamics. Materialists is the most obvious recent example of this, a film that highlights how hyper-capitalist environments make dating less about love and more about checking boxes.
I deserve someone who fulfills all of my criteria.
While the movie was a little bit of a letdown for me, I appreciated how it didn't pull any punches. I want a brunette woman in her 20s who earns at least 100k and weighs under 60 kilos. There are people who actually talk like this. Unrealistic Tinder requirements have bled into the real world. Anora, which swept last year's Oscars, also explores similar themes in a completely different context. Arnie and Vanya's relationship might seem like real love at first, but their dynamic is entirely transactional. Regardless of what they tell themselves, Arnie is seduced by the promise of wealth, and Vanya's only using her for a green card to escape his parents. Love being treated like a commodity is something Gen Z knows all too well. Social media influencers flaunt their lifestyles and extravagant dates, creating unrealistic expectations. Apps like Tinder turn dating culture into a contractual agreement where each party has to satisfy certain criteria in order for both to swipe right. With so many struggling to make ends meet, it's no wonder people desire a rich partner to escape their mundane jobs. Hence, Materialists and Anora are quite relatable for younger audiences with lower wages. From a social perspective, we can turn to Challenges. Textually, Patrick and Art's relationship is at first platonic, then hostile, due to their lust over Tashi. Despite this, there's an oozing homoerotic subtext in their mannerisms and actions throughout the whole film, which Luca Guadagnino's direction excels at. Had anyone else made challenges, we likely would have got a standard Twilight love triangle where the two men only fight over Tashi as a prize. However, thanks to this queer undercurrent, we get a complicated dynamic between the three main characters which feels very modern. When combining this with a non-linear structure, snappy dialogue, and a pulsating score, it's hence no wonder that Zoomers love this film so much. Having discussed all this, let's take stock. What sort of movies will Gen Z filmmakers produce as they continue to enter the film industry? Well, there will be a large focus on nostalgia, yearning, isolation, and loneliness. Social media and the pandemic's effect on Zoomers will be a massive influence on the types of stories they wish to tell, hence why I think these themes will crop up more over the next decade. Dating apps and modern economic conditions will also lead to an exploration of complicated relationship dynamics, both from a financial and social perspective. Finally, queer characters will be allowed to flourish and provide valuable insight into their unique experiences, as well as other marginalized groups as they continue to get more representation. This is an exciting time for emerging directors. Thanks to the hard work of film preservationists, in addition to the internet, watching movies has never been easier. Your options are no longer limited to the theatre and reruns on TV. Future filmmakers have an entire history of cinema to draw inspiration from. I can't wait to see what Gen Z do with such power. Make sure you leave me a like since you've made it this far, and subscribe for more videos like this one.